Tonight, our special coverage as rights groups demand an investigation into the reports of Israeli forces burying patients alive outside a Gaza hospital. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Aisha Ashraf. Today is the 72nd day since Israel started its indiscriminate war on Palestinians. Reports of mass casualties are emerging from Gaza hospitals. Gaza's largest medical complex, Al-Shifa, is under relentless attacks by Israeli forces. The World Health Organization has described the scene at Al-Shifa Hospital as, quote, complete horror. The organization has also condemned the destruction of Kamal Adwan Hospital, calling it appalling. The comments come after medical and media staff say the Israeli military has bulldozed scores of Palestinians camping outside the Kamal Adwan Hospital, burying them alive. Women and children are also among the casualties. The demolition took place while the refugees were sleeping in their tents. Media reports show individuals can be seen searching for the remains of those who lost their lives in this devastating incident. Audio commentator Abdullah Alwan from Al Jazeera's Medan page has been killed in an Israeli air attack in Jabalia. Hamas's Qassam brigades claim hitting Israeli targets in Khan Yunis and Beit Lahia. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has threatened to leave the governing coalition if the war in Gaza doesn't continue at full scale. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Hamas will not control Gaza post-war. At the time of writing, the death toll from Israeli attacks stands at 19,453 Palestinians. The United Nations estimates that an additional 2,700 Palestinians are buried in the rubble. Israel's revised death toll stands at 1,140. The United Nations Security Council is preparing to vote on a resolution to halt Israeli attacks. Concerns are rising in the U.S. about the conflict spreading to Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has denied plans to invade Lebanon. However, he says there is a need for a diplomatic solution for the 72,000 Palestinian refugees along Israel's northern border. U.S. Defense Chief Lloyd Austin is calling his conversation with Gallant productive. Austin plans to convene a ministerial meeting tomorrow to address attacks by the Yemeni Houthi group. The news comes as the Houthis have targeted two ships, Swan Atlantic and MSC Clara, in the Red Sea with naval drones. Major oil companies like Equinor, Euronav, Hapag-Lloyd, and Yang Ming Transport have changed their transit routes to evade targeting by the group. Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor is calling for an immediate investigation following reports of the Israeli army allegedly burying civilians alive outside Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza. The rights group says testimonies from medical personnel reveal Israeli bulldozers killed and buried displaced Palestinians in the courtyard of the hospital. The group is calling for an independent investigation into the allegations. Palestinian Health Minister says the world leaders should not turn a blind eye to Gaza's distressing situation. She's accusing the Israeli occupation of forcibly removing the wounded from the hospital and then leaving them exposed to harsh weather conditions. The Director General of the Health Ministry in Gaza is condemning the Israeli forces for turning the hospital into a military base. This incident has sparked international outrage. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is worsening as Israeli bombings and forced displacements have persisted for over 2 months. The chief operating officer of the United Nations World Food Program says nearly half of Gaza's population is starving. The limited aid entering Gaza has pushed people into a survival mode. The aid deliveries remain inadequate due to delays caused by inspections. Reports show aid trucks arriving at the Rafah crossing Sunday being intercepted by a throng of starving Palestinians. Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency says this level of hunger has never been seen before. Justice for All Canada, an advocacy group, is urging post-secondary institutions to take a clear stance on Israel's war on Palestine. They're calling for condemnation of what they call intentional attacks on academic institutions. They denounced the airstrike on Gaza's universities and the death of Palestinian scholar Sufyan Taya. Sufyan Taya was a president of the Islamic University of Gaza and a visiting professor at the University of Waterloo in Canada. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike earlier this month, along with his family. The Islamic University of Gaza had also been targeted in an airstrike on October 11th. During the first month of war, 12 higher education institutions in Gaza were either partially or fully destroyed. In a joint letter with over 200 signatures, Justice for All Canada has outlined 5 calls to action. These include advocating for the Canadian government to call for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and emphasizing the need to protect academic institutions, leaders, and students. They also propose establishing a scholarship fund in memory of Professor Sofiane Tayyab. They are demanding protection of Palestinian academic institutions by engaging with the United Nations bodies. In response to the concerns raised by Justice for All Canada, Israel Defense Forces spokesperson says they need specific coordinates and the time of Tayyab's death to respond to this case. The spokesperson maintains that Israeli forces follow international law and take feasible precautions to minimize civilian harm. An investigation reveals that Canada's public broadcaster, the CBC, has favored Israeli voices over Palestinian voices in its coverage during the first month of war. A comprehensive analysis by the Breach Media and Toronto Metropolitan University's Review of Journalism finds that the Jewish narrative was favored 42% more than the Palestinian one. The analysis shows an anti-Palestinian bias in CBC's coverage. During this period, the CBC also prohibited its employees from sharing any information about the Gaza conflict on social media that was not previously reported by the broadcaster. This directive contradicts the broadcaster's social media policy. The investigation found that CBC journalists did not report from Gaza while the correspondents were present on ground in Israel. The National, the flagship nightly news and current affairs program, featured 138 Israeli and pro-Israeli voices. This is a stark comparison to the 97 Palestinian and pro-Palestinian voices on the show. Some episodes featured a ratio as high as 7 Israeli voices to 1 Palestinian voice. The inclusion of Israeli Defense Forces officials making unchallenged claims on the show has also drawn criticism. In response, the CBC says it has introduced an anonymous feedback form for employees to address coverage concerns. It also says it has updated some of its guidance for journalists. Pope Francis has once again raised concerns about Israel's actions in Gaza, labeling them as, quote, terrorism. He's expressing his distress over the reported killing of 2 Christian women by Israeli military sniper. The incident occurred at the Holy Family Parish compound in Jerusalem. The Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, the Catholic authority in the region, says 7 other Palestinians have been injured. During his weekly blessing, Pope Francis condemned the targeting of unarmed civilians, including children and the sick or disabled, inside a church complex. He expressed distress at the damage caused by Israeli tank fire to the Covenant of Nuns founded by Mother Teresa, a renowned Christian nun, for her charitable work. In response, Israel's foreign ministry says it is reviewing the incident. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it only targets terrorists and does not aim at civilians. This marks the second time in less than a month that Pope Francis has used the term terrorism regarding events in Gaza. As the Middle East conflict escalates, women's shelters in Canada report increasing hostility towards Muslim women. This is causing women fleeing violence to hesitate to seek refuge. Nisa Homes, a culturally sensitive shelter for Muslim women in Canada, has witnessed a surge in Islamophobic incidents. The shelters have an overwhelming wait list of 500 women and children. This is 5 times their usual number. Their helpline has experienced a 350% increase in Islamophobia-related calls since last year. The shelter's executive director is calling for a proactive approach in addressing Islamophobia within the social service sector. She says it is mandatory to better support marginalized and vulnerable individuals. As winter approaches, hundreds of thousands of refugees worldwide face grim conditions in makeshift tents. Infants and the elderly are at risk of sickness and even death. To aid those in dire need, Islamic charities in different parts of the world have initiated appeals for winter relief. Muslim charity Helping Hand for Relief and Development is appealing for support for the people of Gaza and Palestine. Another renowned charitable institution, Islamic Relief, is distributing winter kits, including food, blankets, heaters, and clothing to over 200,000 vulnerable individuals. This includes refugees and displaced families in different parts of the world. UK-based charity Muslim Hands is providing relief kits to flood victims, earthquake victims, and war refugees in Asia, Africa, and Middle East. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Muslim Network TV, which is a not-for-profit organization. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad.